Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Heirloom Seeds and Stories brought to you by Appetite for Change. My name is Lataja Powell. I am a program evaluator here at Appetite for Change. For those of you who don't know, Appetite for Change, we are a grassroots organization here in North Minneapolis where we believe that food is the tool that can build health, wealth, and social change. I would like it if you all can take some time and help me welcome our guest panelists, Latasha Powell, Princess Haley, and Michelle Horvitz. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm in the office. I knew that was going to happen. So Latasha is one of our co-founders and the chief operating officer. Latasha supervises AFC's programs. She is passionate about food affordability and access for Northside families. She is a lifelong North Minneapolis resident and is active in the local food justice movement to advocate for and give back to her community. Princess Haley, also a co-founder and the individual giving manager. Princess focuses her efforts toward possibility thinking, individual, social, and systemic change. Princess focused her efforts towards possibility, Through her role at AFC, she spent much of her life in Chicago and has lived in North Minneapolis for 25 years, where she works as an educator, healer, and organizer to build strong foundation for lifelong learning and growth. Michelle Horvitz, co-founder and executive director. Michelle oversees the development, finances, and governance of AFC. Years spent as a public defender and working in the kitchen of an award-winning chef informed her work here at AFC. Michelle's father's family is from the North Side, and she is passionate about building racial and social equity in this community. At this time, we can welcome everybody. Princess, Michelle. So I'm just gonna get us started now. I wanna ask the panelists a few questions. First, I would like to know, since we are here to share stories, I would like to know how you all got together and met to start this organization, Appetite for Change. It's open for any one of you to go first.
I can go first. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Appetite for Change's first ever virtual event. We're excited and to see some new faces and old faces, so thank you for coming. I was fortunate to meet Tasha because I thought for a crazy split second I was going to go back and get another advanced degree in community psychology. And so I sat in on a class to see what that was all about. And it wasn't a lecture day, it was a student presentation day. So Tasha was doing a presentation about an internship she had been doing at the Tubman Center, Harriet Tubman Center. And she mentioned that she was a North Side native and was born and raised on the North Side. And I just felt like an instant connection to her, even though like we didn't even speak. And I wanted to introduce myself after class. I think she thought I was a little crazy. And so I gave her my card, asked her if she would reach out to me because I was interested in doing something on the North Side to reconnect to my family roots and make a difference. And she didn't get back to me, so I stalked her a little bit. I emailed her professor like 3 times, asking if her professor would pass along my information again. And I even tried to get the professor to give me her contact information, and she wouldn't do that. But finally, Tasha did get back to me, and we met at Sammy's on the North Side and just talked. And I learned that, you know, she had been a struggling vegetarian and she was growing her own garden, and she was interested in what I had to say and kind of ideas that I had about food and how it could be used as a tool for change. And then Princess I was introduced to by a mutual friend who had worked with her at the Urban League, and we met, well, she can tell you about the significance of the date, but 11/11/11, and we met at French Meadow over on the south side. We broke bread together. We talked about food. We connected over mutual loss that we had just both gone through. And I just felt a strong spiritual connection to her as well. And so then I invited both of them to connect the 3 of us. They both, I think, knew of each other, but had never actually met. and I will turn it over to either of the other ladies to tell their perspective.
Well, Michelle, you did a pretty good job of explaining how me and you met. So it doesn't make no sense for me to add on. But I would just go ahead and just elaborate a little more about her attention of really wanting to meet with me so we can see what we can do here in North Minneapolis. And I'm glad that I did get back to her. But at first, I did think that she was a student in the class. And when I came back the next week, I didn't see her. And I'm like, oh, who is this woman? And yeah, I was playing her off for a while. And my instructor's like, well, this woman really wants to meet you. I think probably you should give her a call. And I did. And I'm glad that I did. And that's how we birthed Appetite for Change.
I remember Jeanette Lieberman connecting Michelle and I, saying we should meet. And I had worked at the Urban League for some years where she was my supervisor, and was at home, not growing my garden, receiving long-term disability benefits, not really focusing on anything. And then when Michelle wanted to meet and talk about food, I think the part that stands out to me is that it was just really weird that there was nowhere I wanted to meet her and eat in North Minneapolis. I had taken my daughter out of North Minneapolis schools. We only ate out over in South Minneapolis because of the foodscape in North Minneapolis. November 11th is both my grandmother's birthdays. So when Michelle and I met, it was after hearing a message from the son that I should go back to the garden, that I should continue to grow food, regardless of the fact that my 16-year-old son had transitioned, and that there would be some healing there for me. So that was like in 2010 and 2011 when she reached out and wanted to talk about food. I just felt like it was the universe ordaining my next steps and telling me which way I should go. So I really didn't have to think, do I meet with this woman? What's her intention? Do I want to get back into the workforce? I was like, this is what I should be doing. And so when I first met Tasha, I remembered being in a room with Michelle and Tasha, and we were talking about the foodscape and our experiences, and just knowing that I never expected there to be such a social justice impact to food work. Thinking about the words that we call stuff, I never thought I would socially change and grow. But I had to acknowledge within myself that there was maybe a moment where I didn't see Tasha with the power and the information that she had as a sister, as a Black woman sitting in the room with me. I kind of would only reference and refer to Michelle and look to her for answers. And so, like Tasha said, being happy that we reached out, overall, as Appetite for Change serves the community, I think it's also developed me as a woman.
I just want to throw something quick in there that a lot of people don't know. In 2010, like Princess mentioned, when her son transitioned on, I had wrote a paper on him. And while I was writing the paper, I was researching a lot about him, and I ran across like an article on Princess, and I had went back to my mom and was like, Mom, this lady sounds so good, I want to meet her. And it was just so crazy. The next year, like, guess who I met? And I was like, who? And she was like, Princess. So that was real weird, and just the universe letting us all know that we needed to be together. Thank you all for letting us all know how you all met. You all really spoke about food. So this next question is, what does real food for real people mean to you? And I would just like to start with Princess.
Real food for real people to me is what I believe blurs the lines of the boxes that we check, of the zip codes that we live in, of the socioeconomical statuses we subscribe to, of the teams, the Washingtons, the Patriots, of the families, the Smiths, the Johnsons, the McDaniels. It's saying everyone deserves access to real food, that we're all real people, so we need to eat real food. I often joke and say, but it's all too true, that we spend so much time trying to find out how we're different and expecting other people to understand why they should respect that and how we identify. When at the heart of it all, we all eat food, our digestive system works the same way, and the food all comes out looking the same way. That's what real food for real people means to me. I'm wondering, what does real food for real people mean to either Tasha or Michelle?
Yes, I'll go next. Even though this is kind of our slogan for breaking bread, I always kind of struggle with this question. So it's the only question that I took note on to help with my answer. So I woke up this morning and I had a spiritual conversation with my grandmother to prepare me to see what should I share. And every time they asked me this question, I didn't know what to share. And she told me, "You got this, Tasha. Share the stories that of what we have shared with you." So what real food for real people means to me is hearing the stories of my ancestors, my grandmother and her sisters tell me how easy access that they had to food. So when she told me of stories of her going outside, picking tomatoes off the vine, eating them, pulling a peach off a tree, eating them. And when my great auntie mentioned a story about her digging a hole to the smokehouse. So they come from a family, their father was a farmer, so they grew up on farmland. They sold food to the town. And my great grandfather was very strict on how much food he allowed them to eat because they did um, sell food for the town. And so my great auntie dug an extra hole to the smokehouse so she could be able to go in there and steal meat to bring back to her siblings and her cousins. So it was 21 children in the house at one time. Um, and then she also told a story of this rooster that was out in the yard. She watched this rooster every day wear the same tie, and she got fed up with it. She was like, "Well, my dad changed his tie all the time. Let me go snatch this tie off this rooster neck." And she did, and she killed the rooster. All she wanted to do was change the rooster tie. Didn't realize that it didn't come off. Um, and just hearing those stories of them growing crops, raising animals, raising cattle, and just having that easy access to local and real food is what real food for real people mean to me. And just to add a little bit is really access to local food, cooking with more whole ingredients, and limited processed and convenient food as possible if you can. Michelle, would you like to share?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think you guys said everything that I was thinking, but and more. But I think one of our youth said it best. Like, if you can't pronounce the ingredients on the label, then it's not real food. If it doesn't come out of the ground, come from the earth, come from an animal, come from the sea, then it's not real food. And like Princess said, real food for real people. We are all human. We are all, we are all creatures of this earth, and we all deserve access, regardless of where we live, how much money we have, what we do for a living, color of our skin, our faith. We all deserve access to real food.
Thank you all for sharing. So now I want to know, why North Minneapolis? Out of all the places you could have chose, why did you pick North Minneapolis? And I'd like to start this question off with Tasha.
Of course you do. I'm the native North Side out of the founders. Why not North Side? You know what I'm saying? For me, being born and raised here in North Minneapolis and seeing my community struggle over the years around food access is why North Side. As a young child, I have memories of walking to 4 grocery stores. The fifth one was a little farther up north that we never shopped at, but we had access to grocery stores to service the community. And just walking with my parents and my aunts and my cousins and going shopping and coming home with bags of groceries from multiple stores is why North Side. And if I just fast forward a little bit to present day, it's not here anymore. We have, we're growing, we're making a great, we're plugging some holes in it right now here in Northside, but it's not quite the experience that I experienced as a child. I do live currently right down from Cub Community Store. It was Cub Food Store until the uprising. It shut down for a period of time. It became Cub Community Store. But for the most part, I really got sick of leaving my community and going shopping. It became actually a norm to me and a norm to people in my community that we had to live outside of North Minneapolis just to get the food that we needed. And I wanted to make that change. And traveling to different states and looking at community that was similar to mine, the same thing was happening. And I was like, why? Why is this happening in communities that is similar like mine? And so Appetite for Change was birthed, and now we're on a mission to hopefully make this community look like how I visioned it or seen it when I was a child. That's why Northside. Michelle?
Well, I think I mentioned before, and Tasia mentioned in my intro, my dad grew up on the north side, and I was raised in the suburbs, and that was mostly due to white flight after the uprising on Plymouth Avenue in '68, which a lot of people don't know the roots of that are so similar to what we're seeing in cities across the country today, and why people are taking to the streets. But I felt some sort of like guilt, I think, of the Jewish community leaving North Minneapolis. There's a really great series right now on a website called tcjewfolk.com if anyone's interested in reading more of the history of the Jewish community on the north side. But I was fascinated with that history, wanted to come back to that community and give back and do something meaningful and build bridges between myself, between the Jewish community and the Black community. And having been a public defender in Miami-Dade County, like Tasha mentioned, I noticed very similar environments in the Black neighborhoods in Miami and in Philadelphia as well, where I went to school, and just really being sort of angry about the disparities and about the differences and compared to where I was raised, and the foodscape and the resources that you think of in a thriving community, grocery stores, farmers markets, restaurants, places to get real food. And coming back to Minneapolis 10 years ago and seeing that not being the case on the north side, I wanted to do something and give back. Princess?
Would mirror Tasha and say, why not North Side? I came to Minnesota about 25, 26 maybe now, years ago on an Amtrak train as a refugee from Chicago, just trying to get away from the violence, trying to get away from the bad food, trying to find an area where I could grow food because my grandmother's friend grew food, but would make us hop the fence to get it. That was really weird. And when I came to Minnesota, I actually arrived in St. Paul, and I got my GED within 8 months. And when I started to look for housing, the lady who was assisting me told me that St. Paul wouldn't rent to me because I was from Chicago. So before I even knew that redlining was a thing, I was sent to North Minneapolis um, to eventually encounter exactly what I was trying to avoid in Chicago. And that was having one of my children's lives taken. And when that happened, I had worked at the Urban League for 10 years. I was working with men who were coming out of prison. My whole caseload were men who had taken life. So I had a different viewpoint, or I had an in to the trauma that people had endured growing up that caused them to offend. So they let me into the stories where they were once victims as children and teenagers, and then grew up and had no intentional healing or no intentional good food. And then they grew up to be offenders. And so I had really decided in my mind to turn my back on North Minneapolis. I felt like I had put in my work. I had worked at the Urban League, helped some people get some jobs, did some HIV testing. And then I felt like that was probably what everybody else would do, would turn their back. So I committed myself to changing the narrative, changing whatever I could change, the foodscape, how teachers are held responsible, how parents are held responsible of knowing where our children are and if they have guns in their houses. I wanted to work to change North Minneapolis instead of turning my back on it. In my heart, I wanted to work for that change. In my mind, I wanted to run away to Belize and meeting these two lovely ladies who had similar stories, but were from different backgrounds and different walks of life, but had the same common goal, was like an answer to my heart.
Thank you all for sharing. This kind of came up within the last few um, conversations you all had, but I would just like to know, how has race impacted um, AFC and the work that AFC does? I would like to start this question off with Michelle. So Michelle, when you're ready, you can go ahead.
How did I know you were going to start with me on this one? I think systematic racism is inextricably intertwined with food. You know, you can read about the history of our food system and how from every corner of it, from farming to meat processing to food workers, restaurant workers, you know, our system has been built on the backs of people of color. And and I was always fascinated and very drawn to that history. And I think just being a white woman and meeting these two fabulous Black women, when we first started to connect and to talk to each other and over literally breaking bread, bagels from Common Roots, with that garlic chive cream cheese. Oh man, it's so good. That we were a lot more alike than we were different, even though we all came from different backgrounds and had different worldviews, and so race has always been there. I mean, I think even at the beginning when we were trying, you know, to create like a shared leadership model and have like 3 co-executive directors, and that wasn't working out so well, and we said, okay, we need one person in charge. We need one person to make the decisions. We need one person to be accountable to the board. And I didn't want that to be me, but hearing both of them say, you know, we have, you know, very little money. We have all these dreams and plans and ideas for programming, but we're not going to get the resources if it's one of us going out and asking. It really needs to be the white woman. And as, you know, as sad as that made me, I didn't disagree. And so I think race has played a integral part in how we move and who we serve. You know, we're primarily a Black-led organization and here to serve the Black community. But I do think that me being the executive director, you know, I think that systems of white supremacy, implicit bias, and things have, you know, inadvertently infiltrated our work, even though we haven't wanted it to. So we've worked through a lot of that. It's, you know, it's really challenging, but I think it's part of our secret sauce that we actually came together across difference and aren't afraid to talk about it. Pete?
I think as I listen to you, I'm questioning how far are we from that truth, or are we still in that truth, that we have to have the face of the organization, you know, be a white woman so that we can continue to get, you know, support. And in the community, the joke, this is kind of like the behind the scenes, I think. So I want to be as real as I'm going to be and not as politically correct as I normally would. But in the nonprofit world, even when I was at the Minneapolis Urban League, and we would, you know, be denied grants, like the staff, not the leadership, but the staff or the community members would say, you know, you got to have a complexion for the protection of the money. And so that, you know, always came with this idea that it's like the brown paper bag test, you know, if you white, you all right. If you brown, stick around. If you Black, stay back. In those songs. And it just makes me wonder, like, all the work that we've done, how far we've gone, how we've grown, but that race, along with other social constructs and ways to communicate this single message of how Black women are, is what holds us back. I got to have my biggest experiences in comparing myself, so to speak, with the other Black founder, Tasha. We don't cook the same thing for holidays. You know, culturally, she's from North Minneapolis. I'm from Chicago. Her family's really big. My family's really small. She doesn't eat pork or beef. I will eat the swine off the flute if you give me a chance. And just that, getting to know her, let me know that as we scoop and clump everybody up and say Black people or white people or Muslims or people who are gender non-conforming, they're this way. Everyone is an individual being having a human experience. And I think race corners us into a low-level playing ground where you don't evolve and you don't elevate, you actually devolve. I think it holds us back. And then I can talk about Michelle. Like, I knew Michelle's mother before I met Michelle, and grew to think she was the coolest, cutest white woman I had ever met. I know the boys was like, oh, she's just so sweet. Like, she worked with my children. Like, and I came from Chicago where it was very segregated. So I only knew Black people. And then when I came to Minnesota, there were Hmong and Lao and Somali, and the Hmong farmers taught me how to grow food. And so I had to step beyond the box I checked. I had to step outside of only Black women are going to understand me. I've had conversations like this with Anne. I've had conversations like this with Terry and Sue. Like, how do we understand similar things, but the world doesn't expect us to see things the same way? And where I don't eat much of Tasha's food because she doesn't bring me food really and cook. I love Michelle's homemade pasta. Just ate the last little bit of it from our meeting that we had, and Tasha bought me leftovers. I don't agree with dogs in the kitchen, but I love Michelle's pasta. It's homemade. She made it for me. I think food is the currency of trust. I think food can help us fix these racial blinders that we've put on. Tasha, what do you think about race?
Well, I just would like to agree with you two lovely ladies. Those were some big pants to fill after listening to you all. And plus, I got a message that we're out of time. And I just love what you two said and agree. So I don't think I can answer this question. Facilitator, where you at?
I'm right here. I'm right here. I ain't slipping. We're gonna move on to the next question. Um, Thank you all for really speaking about race. We know it's hard, and racism is hard to talk about even within our everyday life. But this is a question that everybody across the world wants to know. What has AFC done since the pandemic began? And any one of you can start with this question.
Tej, can you repeat the question for me? I was doing something else.
Yes. So the question is, what has AFC done since the pandemic began? So you can talk about all of the new projects or some projects that we had to cancel due to everything going on.
I won't talk about the projects, but I will talk about how we've allowed ourselves the comfort to consider our health as our wealth and to socially distance our work. I want to say that I honor working at an organization that has it together as far as when we're in the office and how we're going to take precautions to protect ourselves so that we don't get sick. I appreciate that. Our programming that we do and the way that we do it, ensuring that we've had our staff has been taking the updated Serve Safe class and that we're socially distancing and we're not just running in the office. I really appreciate that. So I want to say that we have focused on and actualized our health being our wealth, as far as how we move and follow the rules that have been put in place by our governor. And I'll let Tasha and Michelle talk about the programming.
So, Princess, you jumped in right as I was going to say something similar that I rather really talk about kind of my personal experience instead of what the great work that we are doing. And if needed to be, I can most definitely add that in. But for me, since the uprising, um, it has been a lot. It has really been um, an emotional roller coaster for me. I suffered a lot of anxiety during this time. And, being a Black woman, I really don't get the time and the space to admit that, because I am told that it doesn't exist. There's nothing wrong with you. But I was kind of fortunate and unfortunate at the same time to be on that bridge on the side where the semi was coming when we was protesting. And from my view of what I seen as we was kneeling and standing up, I knew that it was a lot of elderly people and children from all different races in the front. And all I can hear, because I had kind of tunnel vision, was to me seemed like people being ran over. And my heart dropped. And I was instantly sad. Um, then at the coming home, I was frantic. I mean, um, everybody was calling me. I couldn't breathe. I was crying. I was upset. Me and my daughter got separated. We had to jump a fence. Wasn't for sure if we was going to jump in the river because it was a gas tank. And, we was hearing people was below. But I was around a whole bunch of people that was looking out for each other. Um, and that's what made me realize that we are all one. And if we really focus on what we are or things that we have in common, instead of really focusing on the color of our skin, that we could get a long way. And I didn't really realize that I had so much anxiety until it came a time, and it wasn't even the bridge that I was on, it was the bridge that I walked across. That when I drove to that bridge, I started panicking. Um, it was like, wow. So finally, as an adult, I can take time and listen to my body and listen to what's going on with me. And that was it for me. I was out on the front lines and I was like, okay, Tasha, you done served this part for a while. Now it's time for you to get back to your community. Now it's time for you to focus on what they're going to eat and how they're going to eat. And I live right diagonally across the street from a church who was um, giving out food and household goods to the community. So I went there and volunteered and started going to, it's a pastor, Reverend McAfee, that's kind of like our North Side pastor. Went to his church, prayed, talked to him, asked for healing, um, because there was so much going on in my community. And then I was like, Tasha, your baby is right down the street from you. That's my baby appetite for change. And I was like, now what is y'all going to do? And food, kind of like our Grow Food song, our people got to eat. And Appetite for Change is doing some amazing work. And I really just focus on the food part of it and not so much of who's the partners, where it's coming from, but just how we're going to feed people who actually in need. And made some good relationships with people, and we are serving a whole bunch of food. Now, would love it if Michelle can share that part of what we are doing.
I would be happy to. Thank you for sharing, Tasha. Um, yeah, I mean, we have been grateful to be able to serve the community in such a meaningful way since the pandemic hit. Right away, first week of April, we began a partnership with HCMC. We started bringing food to the healthcare workers that were on the front lines. They were realizing that a lot of their frontline workers were themselves food insecure and going through so much stress and anxiety of being exposed to the disease and showing up to work, working extra hours, long shifts. So we were able to feed those folks. We're still continuing that partnership today. We bring food to the NICU at HCMC and also feed some of the mental health workers and frontline EMT and first responders. But then we also became a sort of founding partner of the Minnesota Central Kitchen Coalition, which is being organized by Second Harvest. And it's, for those of you who may be familiar with World Central Kitchen, it's a model of, coming together in a crisis and preparing meals and getting meals to people in need. There hasn't ever really been a very coordinated effort in the Twin Cities to provide prepared meals. Obviously, we have a amazing food shelf and food bank network, but unlike some other cities that we've traveled to, there hasn't been churches may have a monthly meal or a weekly meal. Homeless shelters will obviously provide food to their residents, but this is kind of the first of its kind coordinated effort. So we're one of 5 or 6 kitchens right now producing, wholesome, nutritious, warm meals for people, partnering with Loaves and Fishes that distributes some of the meals, and then a lot of our Northside partners, Pillsbury United, Heritage Park, the YMCA, Northside Achievement Zone, a lot of different folks helping us get Brothers Empowered, helping us get the food to people who need it most. And we started in April with about 500 meals a day, ramped up to 1,000 meals a day. And right now, between our St. Paul kitchen at Union Depot and Breaking Bread kitchen, we're serving over 8,500 meals a week to people. And I think the coalition as a whole recently hit 1 million meals. And I know someone on our team will correct me in the chat, but I think AFC has contributed like over 130,000 or something crazy like that of the 1 million. So we are very, very proud of that and very grateful to be able to serve the community. And, you know, we unfortunately made the really difficult decision to cancel the farmers market this summer for a whole host of reasons. And Breaking Bread has been closed, and Community Cooks, our flagship program where we bring people together to cook, eat, and talk, has also not been happening. So that meant that we haven't really had a main outlet for the produce that we grow on our 7 urban farms. And we got together with a few other organizations that are part of the Metro Food Justice Network, and we piloted a program that is basically purchasing produce from folks like us, also immigrant and refugee farmers that grow food who, you know, haven't been able to sell to restaurants and caterers and schools because those markets have just been decimated. So we've been able to purchase local produce, get some, you know, staple ingredients and some locally raised animal proteins, and making meal boxes. So partnering with Local Crate, which you may see their meal kits, they sell them in Target. You can also get them delivered to your home, but we've created meal boxes that have recipes that are designed by us and in partnership with Eastside Table in St. Paul. And we have a 16-week pilot that's in progress right now. Over 500 families in total. We had people sign up right away. We had a wait list, and we deliver those meal boxes to their home through a partnership with Greater Twin Cities United Way and DoorDash, and also with some help from some of our volunteers. Some of you are on the call, so thank you for your help in getting those meal boxes to people. And also people can come and pick them up at Breaking Bread, but it's 2 recipes, 1 vegetarian, 1 animal protein, all whole ingredients, almost all local ingredients, and we've seen a really wonderful response. So even though we can't bring people together to cook, we're bringing the food to people so that they can cook at home.
Well, thank you all. This is why I joined Appetite for Change. Like, even through hardships, we always find a way to be there for the people in the community. So again, thank you all. Now I'm going to open it up for the audience to ask questions if there are any questions. So I'll just like to hand it over to Jadea now. So thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Tasia. Hey all. A question that we got that I think is a really strong one, and I'm excited to hear from Princess Tasha and Michelle. What happened to the food stores in Minneapolis? Where are they?
You know, I seen that question, and I was going to kind of respond to that question. I believe when kind of the racial equity question came up, can't remember what it was, but I just have to be perfectly honest to myself and to you all, and tell from my worldview what happened to the grocery store once white flight took place here in North Minneapolis. The grocery stores left as well. The department stores, everything just started leaving away. And at first I thought it was normal, and I really didn't know what was going on. I just knew it was a change, and I didn't know in the background what was really happening. And that's what happened. A lot of Black people was kind of living from, if you're familiar with the north side, one of our main corridors, also Plymouth. So many Black people was at the time living beyond Plymouth. In like the 80s, towards the 90s, they started moving further north towards Broadway, and then further north towards Dowling, and keep going on. And once we started moving further north, things started leaving out the community. And that's what happened to the grocery stores, uh, from my point of view.
I want to also say that I think Tasha's absolutely right that people left. There was, you know, businesses didn't feel like they could thrive, or they didn't feel safe, or, you know, whatever the nonsense based on, you know, misperceptions of the community. But I also, you know, Princess will always ask, is the food here? Do we eat it because it's here, or is it here because we eat it? And so I think as those grocery stores were leaving, there was also an influx, a purposeful influx of fast foods, you know, convenience stores selling a whole bunch of junk, and I think that it was both the exodus and the influx of these big box fast food stores that were intentionally placed in certain communities.
And I often think too, going back to that time and with the work that we're doing now, sharing the histories between Jew folk and Black folks, like when they left those stores, why couldn't Black business owners own those stores unless, like you said, Michelle, it's an intentional plot against poor people or Black people. I'm going to say of Black women because that's the narrative I know, for us to feed our babies blue dyes and red dyes so they can't sit still in class, to assist the prison to the school to prison pipeline. Now, how do we change that narrative? I want my daughter to be able to buy a business on West Broadway and sell whatever she wants to sell. They did a great job of making North Minneapolis look just like Chicago. But I don't think we had food and understood that food is the tool that can be used to create the type of social change, which looks like you're in the garden and at the cutting board or at the kitchen table and you're having conversations. You're asking, who are you? I'm just picturing the Jewish community leave North Minneapolis and Black people start to move in. What were the conversations? Or were we just sliding by each other with our stereotypes and our biases? And I think food makes it really comfortable to ask really good, uncomfortable, challenging, hard questions of yourself and of other people. When I came, North Minneapolis already looked like Chicago. And I didn't even notice that that was exactly where I didn't want to be. But I did my grocery shopping over South at the Wedge, at the co-op, because that's not the type of food I wanted to feed myself or my children. Great question, though.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And Princess, I'm glad you started speaking to that, because I think it's the beginning of an answer to a great question someone asked is, what do you see as AFC's role in the larger conversation around community well-being?
I think to organize, we use food as a community organizing tool. We have put together a great set of anticipatory questions in the way we engage people to the point where they're comfortable. And then they've got good, real food in their mouths. So their brains is doing something it may have never done before. And they're moving their bodies, or they're cutting at the cutting boards with a stranger they don't know. So their brain is oxygenated. So they get to think a new thought. They get to live in possibility. They get to experience something and then explain it and then hear the world's definition of it, because sometimes language just is oppressive and leaves you out. And then they get to model it, and then they get permission. I get permission to be vegetarian when I hear that Tasha's a vegetarian, because there's this idea around what Black people don't do and don't do, like, and what white people do and don't do. And so I think Appetite for Change's role is to be the platform of bringing the real food to the real people and letting them talk about the SROs in schools and the police brutality and the housing and the unemployment rate, with food in the forefront.
Well, Princess, you was like in my head, because what was popping up in my head was when I gave myself permission or allowed myself to stop eating meat. I got a lot of pushback from my family, got a lot of pushback from my community. It was made fun of, Princess kind of mentioned I have a large family, which I do. My family comes from the South. I'm first generation here in North Minneapolis, born and raised. And they were saying things like, and I kind of already mentioned earlier, my family was raised on a farm. So they pretty much ate everything from all kinds of animals and vegetables. But I chose to become vegetarian because I really lost faith in a system to feed me and my family good food that we deserve, or more accurate term, real food. And by doing that, people in my community and family assumed that I wanted to be white. Like white people was the only people that was deserving to eat or have access to real food. And they started making fun of my body image. I'm eating rabbit food at Thanksgiving. And the jokes just kept going on and on. And I stood in there for 2 whole years taking the abuse. And I met these two women like a couple of years later, and they kind of allowed me to accept a little bit more meat in my diet. But I realized when I was vegetarian that I stayed away from the junk food. I stayed away from the fast food. And to this day, when I see people in my community about this work that we are doing with Appetite for Change, becoming vegan, more vegetarian, growing their own food, canning, cooking, home cooked meals, baking goods, selling, having family come over and like, dang, Tasha, you sitting there shucking the corn. Why you just didn't go making no corn? Why you making those brownies from scratch? I'm just working harder in the kitchen to prepare a good meal for my family, and to hear them say, when I buy a home, I want to do the same thing that you're doing. When I'm on Facebook and seeing my cousin, it's making me a little jealous because she is killing the game. She growing food, she canning, she jarring, she juicing. I mean, she just all over the place. And, we kind of talked to her, and she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to lock my hair. I'm not going to go natural. I'm not going to cook that. And she done passed all 3 of us up over here on what she doing. So I said that to say that most people don't listen to what you say, but they watch what you do and keep doing it. And it takes time for change. And change is coming.
Thank you, Tasha. That's powerful. And there's so much more conversation to have, but we're out of time, so I'll turn it to Tasia.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. You all can stay connected with AFC by liking us on Facebook and following us on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you, Michelle, Tasha, and Princess for being our guest panelists. I just want to thank everybody for just really being here and listening to the stories that the co-founders have to share that we hear all the time, but a lot of people don't really get to share. And I think it was just added to the chat, our little names on all of those social media sites. Now I'm going to take us out. I just want to know, before I take us out, is Princess and Michelle joining me, or am I in this on my own?
I'm with you, little homie. You know, I say your words. Like, is the food here because we eat it, or do we eat it because we here? That's a Tasia quote. So I'm always let the youth be the truth. You want me with you, I'm with you.
You know I'm with you, Tasia.
All right, well, who would like to start?
If it doesn't mold when it gets old, then it shouldn't be sold. That's a violation of the health code. We all know, but we still eat it though. It's unbelievable. We rooted in the hood, watch our seeds grow. I'm fresh as kale. That's that green flow. I said I'm fresh as kale. That's that green flow.
Two?
So I thought about it on the weekend, like, what am I eating and what should I eat first? So I did a little bit of research, found out it got deeper. There's a whole marketing procedure for getting healthy foods. So they put the fast food in my hood.
I got an appetite for change because the burgers at McDonald's compared to my mama's, man, I saw ain't the same. And that's real, no process. You see a food desert, I see progress. We strive for more, for healthy foods in every corner store. Has never had this mindset before. We all can make the choice, but the change is yours. Thank you all. Please stay connected and we love y'all.